we had some really amazing people who supported us along the way, and you see their names here, and I won't go through each of them, but we want to just make a big shout out and thanks to these amazing professionals over at the Florida Institute for Child Welfare. I also just want to brag on my little team here, because there was quite a bit of support and authorship that went into it. You just heard from Margarita Amato Blanco, but I would love it if Skylar, Mike, and Reagan, and if Ty's on here, could come on screen just for a minute and wave at folks. You don't have to say anything, but maybe just turn your video on for a minute and say, hey.
Hey.
There we go. There's Skylar.
Good morning. Happy Friday. Thank you all for joining us.
We're so happy to see you all this morning.
And Reagan, thank you. And do we have Mike?
I am here.
Mike.
Thank you all for being here. Very exciting. Very proud of what we've done. Hope you all love it as much as we do.
Excellent. Always big thanks to our center director, Ellen, and Lisa Gale Alloway, who helped us with some of the nerdier pieces around the paperwork of FSU. But mostly I'd like to really kind of just give a shout out here at the end to Jane Dwyer again. Jane, you did a couple of really important things that helped us along the way, because I think when you're developing something and you have it in your head and you're looking at it for a long time, it certainly is clear to you what you're trying to say. So having the ability to have some fresh eyes is incredibly helpful. Jane, can you speak for a minute to what you were able to do to help us in the review process?
Sure. Well, before I do that, though, I just want to let you know how honored I am to be a member of this team. And I commend every member that was just mentioned and every member that you see listed for the CFC team of SOS Interventions. I really want to commend you for the work that you did. I think it will become apparent very early on for the audience members to see the value of the work that went into this. And I think it's going to be life-changing for child welfare workers. And I hope that early on you will get the same enthusiasm for this as I got and my students got. So to get back to your question, Jen, first off, I had my substance use and misuse class review the first chapter, and overwhelmingly, let me change that, unanimously, they loved it. They loved the logical flow of the introductory ideas, and it definitely set a great foundation of knowledge for beginners. It served to really engage my students and get interested in the topic. You know, you talked a lot about basics like, you know, person first language and implicit bias and stigma, the interaction of culture and substance use, and of course, highlighting empathy and compassion. And so they were taken from chapter 1. And so anyway, it was an honor for us, that being me, the professor, and my students, to be able to assist in your sort of preliminary review. And hopefully, you know, the feedback that they gave was helpful as you moved forward. And then I had the honor of going through every chapter and offering feedback. And, you know, I just want to say overall, I appreciated how you took this very intimidating and somewhat overwhelming topic and were able to break it down into understandable pieces, highlighting topics that every helping professional in the field working with substance use disorder should know about. So again, I'll pipe in whenever you would like me to, but you're in for a treat, folks. It's an amazing curriculum. Every single module was done well thought out, done with care, thoroughly covers topics And I'm excited to get feedback from everybody else who's viewing today. So thanks for
Oh.
letting me be a part of this again.
Well, thank you so much, Jane. We valued your feedback so incredibly, and we just respect you so much as an expert in this area. So
Thank you.
thank you for the very kind compliment. There is one more gratitude I'd like to give before we do a little activity here. At the very beginning of this project, we knew that we wanted to hear from a lot of CPIs and supervisors and case managers. And so we engaged in some very intentional activities. And hopefully some of you out there that are on this call were a part of that. We took your feedback to heart. We did surveys with family members. We did surveys with CPIs and supervisors. And we did focus groups with both of those two populations as well. And we're able to really understand the space, I think, a lot more, so that we knew that as we developed this stuff, we had some confidence about what was needed and wanted out there in the field. So I just want to put a little shout out to that. There's lots of gratitude to go around. So let's do that. Let's share a little gratitude all the way around here. We're going to do a fun little activity, attitude of gratitude word cloud. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and let us do this. If you have your phone out, one easy way is to just focus your phone right there on that code in the corner. Or you could go to menti.com and you could enter 5909. 2422, and it's going to ask you, oh, look, we already got some responses. What are 3 things that you are grateful for? I'm so glad Sunshine came on there on this rainy day in Florida. Oh, I love my dogs too, my pets. This is lovely. Ooh, look, families in the middle. What's so great about the word cloud is the more people write a word, the bigger it gets and the more it's in the center. So we can really see where there's lots of overlap. Oh, and yeah, feel free to chat it if you can't get into the word cloud. Isn't that fun, Jane? What are your thoughts?
I love it. I love it.
And look, families staying in the center, lots of people. And isn't that just so appropriate as we're going to be talking about support of substance use interventions, specifically in family systems and family systems theory as well. So very appropriate there.
It is appropriate, as is health, because this has everything to do with wellness and, friends for support.
Ooh, I love
Nice.
coffee in there, Jane. I see coffee in there. And I almost just want to, go like this with my coffee because I feel you on that. I love that I see the word today in there. What a great thing to be thankful for this very day. Fridays would be good on there. Margarita always laughs at me because I'm thankful for Mondays because I have a whole week to accomplish everything.
I have to admit, I'm the exact opposite. I'm thankful for Fridays.
All right. Very good. Thank you guys so much for playing along with us. Oh, is it still going? That's pretty solid. I'll give people a minute to have a look, see at all the different words out there. Do I see? What is that word? Oh, my glasses aren't helping me on that one. Ooh, purpose. That's nice. Lots of pets. Jane and I love our pets.
We are both proud Frenchie moms.
All right. So here's the learning objectives that we're going to accomplish today. We want to make sure that we hit some really important things for you. And we know that some of you are just hungry for a little content. So we won't let that go by. We're going to talk about the practical strategies for working effectively with family members that are impacted by substance use and child welfare. And we're excited to debut our protective factors model and its role in promoting resilience and how we've imagined that together. We'll look at some innovative approaches to facilitating positive behavior change. We'll review some of the intervention pieces within the curriculum. So we're actually going to show you a few pieces of the curriculum itself. And then we want to make sure that we highlight the importance of collaboration, building trust, open communication, and mutual respect for family members. So just to kind of set the stage, we have developed, we're going to go into some detail about some of the pieces of this, but we've developed this intervention as an advanced certification course in partnership with not only Florida State University College of Social Work, the Florida Institute for Child Welfare, the DCF, and the legislature, really, but also so many child welfare stakeholders along the way. And we really wanted this to be a research-informed approach to family engagement so that child welfare professionals could work in a strength-based, solution-focused way to do brief interventions. No moment can go by without us thinking about how can we leverage this moment to help people make positive changes. So here's the challenge that we had ahead of us. We had a little challenge in front of us. We knew that 1 in 8 children have lived with a parent with substance use disorder in the system. And we also knew that when parents come in, there's a lot of pressure on them to make behavior changes, and that can be very, very tricky. That's a stressful situation. It's not they're signing up to go to substance use treatment. It's someone saying, you should do this. You need to do this. And there may be some consequences associated with not doing it. So it's already kind of an under pressure situation. And then we also knew that the contact that child protective investigators and case managers have is often very brief. So how do we take that into consideration? We wanted to make sure that we increased skillful practice, we re-inspired professionals, and hopefully by that we were able to decrease burnout. So here's something that you guys might recognize if you're a fan of, like I am, and we're going to talk about this more in just a minute, cognitive behavioral interventions, then you might recognize this as the cognitive behavioral iceberg. And what's really cool about the cognitive behavioral iceberg is it's an analogy or a metaphor for human behavior. So if you think about a real iceberg, there's just this one little part of the ice that's above the water that we can see. And the only reason it's there is because there's a heck of a lot more ice underneath the water holding it up. So what's the behavior we can see? That's called overt behaviors or action behaviors. But the only reason those actions are there is because underneath there's a whole bunch of behaviors that we can't see people doing. That's their thoughts, that's their feelings, that's their attitudes, and that's their core beliefs. And they're almost like a little bunny trail. And people's actions are based on their thoughts, feelings, and core beliefs. The reason why people act the way they do is because of that. Now I'm going to take you, so that's the individual behavior change piece. Now I'm going to take you to a systems perspective, because this is going to help frame what we did. From a systems perspective, we see, for example, a parent does a behavior that leads to trouble, and now they're involved in the system. And the system responds with an action to that parent's action. And it almost kind of just goes around in a circle. Action, response, action, response, action, response. And in those actions that the system is responding with are only going to be helpful if we find out why the parent actions are in place at all. So until we go down here deep and we figure out what leads people, I should say, to do the things that they do from a systems perspective, we're often not even touching the actual issues that are at hand. So we're hoping that we help people, individual professionals, understand what this stuff is and be able to address it so we can be more effective and more efficient without just applying a templated response that we give to everyone, but actually individualizing it. Is there anything you want to add to that, Jane, or
No, and I think it's really, I think it's just really important that you said that you gave the, the iceberg example, because that's what's going to make the child welfare workers and the family members change. Like that's exactly what we're looking to do. And if we can't pinpoint where the change needs to occur, there's going to be no change. So I love the image of the iceberg. So, and you explained it beautifully.
Thank you. Thank you. That was good to have you chiming in on that. We really did take into consideration best practices. And as you know, Jane, like cognitive behavioral theory has been guiding us for many, many years now. We go back even, there's sort of these 4 waves or 4 generations of CBT. And I will tell you that we as a team, we made sure that we had content that represented each of these waves, because I think even as we get to wave 4, sometimes that first initial part gets a little lost. It's the simplicity of operant conditioning. It's the simplicity of understanding the benefit of reinforcers and incentives, and being able to know how to apply those. What's the frequency? What's the intensity of application that actually can help us really grow the intrinsic motivation there. And then that second wave where cognitive theory came along and got married. I always say they got married to behavioral theory, like they fell in love, they got married, and they've been together ever since. So that was that second wave. And then in the 90s, we started seeing the addition of mindfulness, emotion stuff. So you see some things down there about metacognition, but you might be familiar with ACT, for example, acceptance and commitment theory, dialectic behavioral theory. And those things started really taking us to the next level and saying, people are more than just punishers and reinforcers, or even more than just how they think and believe. There's some emotions involved there. And finally, and most recently, we've started to see how a humanistic perspective, a determination theory, those kinds of things, spirituality, motivational interviewing, strength-based, virtue-centered interventions started to really take us to the next level. So we have addressed all of these things within the work that we've done.
I was just going to say it's peppered throughout the course. Everything that Jen just mentioned is a part of each module. And you know, of course, you know, as she said, as she mentions, it's all research driven too. So anyway, I love, that was one of the things that I loved most about it is you know, the cognitive behavioral, the motivational interviewing, the mindfulness, it's all peppered throughout each module.
Yeah, it was cool to hear you saying, Jane, just to go back to one of our conversations, that you've been teaching so much of this for so long because it is best practice, and it was refreshing for you to see it through sort of a different lens, or a, you know, kind of a different take.
Yeah.
So let's just do a quick overview of our chapters here. We did a couple of things to make it simple. You know, I just gave you some stuff. It's all theory. But how do I break this down and make it practical? How do I take all this theory and turn it into my everyday practice? And so in each chapter, we included practical tips. We have the tips icon comes up, we teach some content, and then we break it down and say, hey, here's how you make it simple and take it out with you every day when you work with your caseload. So we hope that really hit home. I think you appreciated that part in particular, Jane.
Okay, I'm going to go on record by saying the tips was my very favorite part of each chapter, because again, a lot of times, especially neophyte healthcare professionals, people who are just entering the field, they need like anchors to feel that they're doing the right thing, that to feel, you know, confident and secure. And the tips actually gave, you know, examples of things to say in given situations. As you just said, it's just a practical application of things that were just presented in theory. So I loved the tips, and I'm quite certain all of you will too.
Awesome. We also wanted to give people a chance to think deeply about some of the pieces of it. And so at each chapter, when we give an activity or some meaty content, we follow it up with an opportunity to do a reflection. And we have structured questions that we ask you to think about and maybe write something down, you know, and be able to sort of increase your awareness around these things by digesting it. And so there will be a opportunity to either print the pages, or I think we're going to have a fillable PDF that will allow you to respond to questions all along the way.
And the reflection certainly fostered critical thinking, which I think is, you know, imperative for professional growth. So I love that there was time allotted in each module for just, hey, let's sit back for a moment, think about what we just learned, you know, sort of synthesize it all, and let's put our thoughts on in this journal-like exercise. So I loved that piece too, Jen.
Thank you so much for saying that. We start off by laying some groundwork, and we're going to give you a quick preview here of chapter 1. Chapter 1 is entitled Words Matter, and here we really address how we talk about people to people, how we do that in our case notes, and how we do that in our actual verbal interactions. And so at the very beginning of chapter 1, you get to see this video, and we're going to watch it now together, and it'll give you a little taste.
You're about to meet Michael. He lives fast as a self-made millionaire.
You didn't have to dress up. It's all right.
You're going to photograph Michael. He's actually saved somebody's life. Michael is an ex-inmate. He's a commercial fisherman. Michael claims to be psychic.
Nice to meet you.
Michael's a former alcoholic. Here's your camera. I would like you to flesh out the essence of who he is.
What would you like out of this? What would you like the photograph to say about you?
Do you find that being a psychic impacts much on your day-to-day life?
I can see this is emotional for you. Like to get to know the person.
You've only got 10 minutes, right?
I think you're a guy that's put yourself out there. You're not hiding anything. My plan was to find out about whoever it was and to try and get that. And what I learned from him is he's incredibly brave.
It was really intense. With a shirt ad. Sorry.
I wanted to see the nature of the person, which then present a challenge. How do you portray him as a fisherman? That's perfect.
He's a self-made millionaire and sort of a little bit intimidating. I wasn't going for a beautiful, nice, perfectly lit portrait.
I just want to try bring out something of who you are. I think that you just treat people like they're everyday people, like everybody is. Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, I hope I've got that guy's bravery on film.
So it was a very intimidating environment.
So you're working. I like that empty chair next to it too.
Because it's a totally different person.
Yeah.
Almost looks like 6 different people. So not everything I told you today was true. I'm not a fisherman. I am not an alcoholic. The GFC hit me hard, but I've never been a millionaire. Never been in prison. I am a Bondi lifesaver, but the story we talked about never did. Not psychic. Can barely spell it.
Before I knew there were different characters these, I thought, that's really strange. These don't look like portraits of the character I thought you were. You always got your own preconceptions and you've got your ideas.
It pushed me into a position and a space that I wouldn't normally be in.
You have to dig a lot deeper. I mean, you've got to be, I think you're a lot more creative to work out how you want to play things.
All right. I hope that set you up a little bit for how we want to disrupt some of the assumptions that we make when we come into situations, and we want to kind of let go of preconceived notions and just start at least with an open mind and some flexibility that the people that we work with can surprise us. In chapter 2, we talk a little bit. So we do 2 things here. In chapter 1 and 2, we lay the groundwork. So first with vocabulary, and secondly with a quick understanding of the brain and how it works. We do not plan to make you brain scientists, so we kept it simple and we only used a couple big words. One of them is neuroplasticity. So we taught you a couple big words there, but nothing to be overwhelmed or intimidated by at all. We wanted to just say this in this chapter. Our brains are impacted by trauma and substance use in a way that carves pathways that makes it a lot more challenging to make choices, for a person to make choices when they have these well-worn pathways. I'll speak to that a little bit later in this webinar when we get to emotion regulation. But we also wanted to offer a hopeful perspective here. Just because you have well-worn pathways that have been leading you into trouble doesn't mean you're stuck with it forever. There is something called neuroplasticity, and we can rewire our brains. Even when we're old, we can teach an old dog new tricks. We can learn new things. And in some ways, in some ways, kids can do it better. And in some ways, adults can do it better because they sort of have that integrated brain where the right and left hemispheres talk to each other a little more. So I don't know if you want to comment at all on how we addressed Our Brains chapter 2, Jane, but that's the nutshell version.
Yeah, the brain has the amazing capacity to recover is what I felt was highlighted in that chapter. And as you just mentioned, it was very unintimidating. It just broke down, the basics for, of course, the audience, healthcare professionals. We don't have to be neurosurgeons, right? So again, I applaud you for making it so understandable, so unintimidating, and everything that you highlighted are important things that that we need to know, such as neuroplasticity and the amazing ability to rewire our brains. So I loved this chapter. I thought it was really well done and not overly simplified, but just right.
Good. That's hard. That's hard with stuff like this. So I'm glad you feel like we hit it just at the right place. The remainder of the chapters, well, most of all the rest of the chapters that we have are a part of what we decided to do to really take this to the practice level. And we have designed a structured intervention. And so I'll explain a little bit more about what that means, but I wanted to give the tip of the hat to a couple of other structured interventions that are out there. One being SBIRT, probably some of you have heard of it. It's an acronym: screening, brief interventions, and referral to treatment. It's been used in medicine, particularly with nurses and doctors to, in a very brief moment, a very short period of time, to be able to do something that is helpful and meaningful for that person to make positive changes. There's a couple of similar models in corrections, where probation officers have a very short period of time to work with someone. STIX is the number one main one, comes down from Canada. So Strategic Training Initiative and Community Supervision. There's also EPICS, which is out of the University of Cincinnati, and STARS, which is what the federal government uses in this vein. And so we were inspired by these structured brief interventions to design what we have put together. And here is our model. It's the PLEASE model. It's called the PLEASE model. And it is represented, obviously, with our acronym, PLEASE, with each letter standing for an essential component of what you would do when you have contact with a family member. So this is designed to, it could all happen. All of these things could happen in 20 minutes or so. And so you can do it in a very brief meeting with a parent. We'll just quickly walk us through a couple slide on each chapter. Clearly, each chapter has quite a bit to it, but I told Margarita this morning, I feel like today's webinar, I would love to go deep into each of these, but we have limited time. So it's almost like I'm taking the metaphoric skipping stone, and just kind of skipping it across the water of the curriculum generally here, but giving you a little taste. So P is really something that happens before you go out and spend time with family. This is where you're planning and you're preparing yourself. This is where some organization and self-awareness can really help you out, especially because often in child welfare, you guys are going into situations where things may be in crisis. And so the more you can prepare yourself ahead of time, not just with the paperwork, but also how do you prepare your mind to walk into these situations? How do you know that you've got your safety as a priority and the safety of others in these situations? So we've given you some framework for that. Listen comes here early at the beginning, and this little guy's so cute with his one ear up. I don't know how they got him to do that, but he's just adorable. And we have had some doggy appearances on various Zoom calls and doggy dates with some of the College of Social Work folks. So we're big fans. But why listen at the front? Why listen at the beginning? And, you know, one of the things that we know is that there is a construct of social dominance that comes into play in these types of interactions. And when we yield the floor at the beginning of situations that could be heated, and we let the other person go ahead and give us the message that they have, go ahead and vent, then we are in a position where we're saying without saying what you think is important, and you have agency in this interaction. And so yielding the floor is really important. It also helps us a lot when we have more information about where the person's coming from. So it's also a safety component. There's something in corrections called dynamic security. It's a way in which correctional officers are tuned in and building rapport with the people that they're supervising so that they can understand who those people are, understand what they're going through, and keep things safe. So knowing who you're dealing with, knowing what's important to them is not just showing them respect, it's also about gathering information for safety. We defined engage very specifically in this curriculum. We actually define it according to the most recent version, the third edition of the Motivational Interviewing, Preparing People for Change book, Drs. Miller and Rolnick. And we have used that engage model to design our curriculum. There are specific ways that I will do this when I'm good at it. If I get good at it, there are some specific things I'm going to do, and we teach those. And this piece is very, very rich in our curriculum, and it is something that speaks to those pieces that we talked about before. Collaboration. We're going somewhere together with our clients. We're both going to drive. We're both going to steer. We're going to steer together. We are going to understand what's important to the other person. And here I would also say there's a bit of, I am here listening. I am here desiring to understand you rather than desiring to be understood. There's a shift that happens there. So engagement is very rich and has quite a bit to it. The next goal here is, now that we've gathered some information, we've found ways to connect. We really want to be able to assess the situation, gather some data, be able to find out what is happening now. What can be helpful now? Where are things at in the current moment? And then that's going to direct us as to where to go next. Here's the exciting thing about the S in please. It's like an accordion. It's like a tool belt. It has 4 different skills that you can do in this brief intervention. So you're going to assess the situation. And based on that assessment, you're going to select one of these 4 things to work with the person on. So we have support with motivation first. Support with motivation is based, just like Jane said earlier, on motivational interviewing. I gave you the site. If you're a MI fan, you're going to be excited to hear that in the coming year, you should see a 4th edition of the book by Miller and Rolnick. And I did thankfully get a preview of that at our last conference. So we were able to integrate not just the 2013 information from the authors, but now we're able to refine and simplify some of the definitions according to what will be 2023 edition. So that's really exciting too. But we have our lovely definition of motivational interviewing here. If you want more information or training on motivational interviewing, just reach out to us. We'll hook you up with all kinds of things. We actually have a free webinar available where Skylar and I presented on using motivational interviewing with family members to engage.
And I just want to give you a shout out, Jen, and let the audience know that you are one of the experts in the field of motivational interviewing. You're a member of a very elite group of people who network. And I just feel that I've learned so much from you about motivational interviewing in our interactions together. But I just wanted to recognize that this is one of your many areas of expertise, and it's quite obvious throughout the modules that you shine in this arena. So anyway, I just
thank
give
you.
you a little shout out there.
That's so kind. And I will say that I did drink the Kool-Aid. So I came to motivational interviewing very much looking for, how do we work with mandated clients?
Mm-hmm.
How do we do that? How do we, help people find their own motivation? And I believe so. If you want to nerd out with me for a minute on it, motivational interviewing is not a theory. It is based on self-determination theory. It's based on humanistic psychology, but it's not a theory in and of itself. People get that twisted sometimes. It's also not the stages of change. It is an idea that was born out of grassroots conversations between a psychologist and people struggling with alcohol use disorder. And Dr. Miller literally started asking different kinds of questions and doing different kinds of reflections, and seeing that how people respond to what we say depends a lot on what we say, which is pretty cool because it means we have influence in how people come into an interaction with us. And so when I found it, I got really excited. And when I tried it, I got even more excited because it works.
Mm-hmm.
Here's our support with cognitive behavioral interventions. We did a couple of really exciting things here, which I believe you'll see. You'll see. Oh, we didn't put the one in here. That's okay. So we actually designed, there's a couple of different tools out there that help people start to write down their thoughts or identify their thoughts. This is the cognitive piece of this. And we designed a behavior reflection. Some of the tools that you might be familiar with are the ABCs or the behavior chain, those kinds of tools. Well, we have a fresh view on that, and we have put it as a worksheet as well. We've asked people to try it out that are taking the course, and then try out using it with family members to see if we can help make an impact there. We also knew that one of the ways that people feel empowered is when they're able to identify their own goals and then actually build a plan themselves to find success in that area. And so we built this on our protective factors model, which we'll talk about after a brief break, which is coming up. We have a brief break coming up in about 8 minutes or so. And so we'll talk about it a little bit more, the protective factors model, after our break. But here, the collaboration is key. We have the scaling activities from motivational interviewing, readiness to change scales built into it. Each component of the goal setting worksheet is definitely based on evidence. So being able to identify 3 areas or 3 reasons to change, identifying what's most important, connecting it to your values. We do a lot of work with values also, which we didn't really mention much in our PowerPoint for today, but it's super important to get to those core values. And so support with goal setting. And then finally, the last of the 4, and perhaps in some ways, one of the most challenging, can be support with emotional regulation. And so how do people learn to stay cool in tricky, intense situations? And here, again, a brand new model, a fresh take on something that I can do that's practical to help me stay cool in tough situations. The thing that I love the most about that is that we've designed this so that you can use it with yourself, and you can use it by teaching it to others as well. So 2 different ways because if we're not staying calm, the chances are that the other person's not going to stay calm either. Anything to add on emotion regulation, Jane?
I was just going to add that just reviewing this, I was able to incorporate things into my personal life that, let's face it, we all have daily challenges, and it personally helped me to grow. Or I should say, in a given situation, I was really cognizant of how I was reacting as a result of just, having this fresh on my mind. So I think everyone in the audience would recognize their own personal, of course, professional growth too, when you engage in these modules. So it's all about personal growth. We're always growing,
I know, it's so cool when you know this stuff and then you can use it with yourself, or you get reminded of this stuff. And one of the cool things that happened is that as you were one of 3 people that really early on came and said, hey, thanks. I used this stuff when I was going through it. I used it with myself and it helped me. And Mike was the other one of the other ones, and a 3rd person as well. And he's one of the authors, and he was like, I'm going through this stuff and writing this stuff. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is reminding me how I can manage my own life in a way that is, going to help me reach my highest goals. So
totally capture my voice there, Jen. Exactly. But it is true. It was personally transformational for me. I did want to put that out there. So thank you all.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. All right, so we've planned ahead. We've listened a lot at the beginning. We've engaged and found ways to connect. We've done some assessment of what's important, what's urgent in that situation, and where I need to go next. We've offered some brief support with some concrete tools that we know are best practices. And now we're going to step back and we're going to evaluate that session, right? And that will drive referrals to treatment as well. We did a couple of things here in evaluate. I mean, Jane, maybe you want to speak to some of the things you particularly liked in this session. I know you had mentioned, the documentation issue, that just knowing how to do that in a way that reduces your own stress in life. What stood out to you in evaluate?
Well, it's funny. I think I want to just mention here how uncanny it is that the parallels that the Please model has when I cover the content of the class that I teach in the College of Social Work called Interviewing and Documentation in Social Work, and that's a required foundational class that all of our bachelor level social workers have to take. So, there was great coverage on all of the topics that Jen covers in Please. And once again, I just want to say how easy and palatable it all is for child welfare workers to absorb and again, incorporate into practice. So, specifically talking about evaluate, this is a really important piece, we're ethically bound to document and use best practices. So I can't stress the importance of this evaluation phase in the Please model. So I was really happy to see it covered so thoroughly. And I think, again, it's just going to greatly benefit the child welfare workers, all helping professionals when they're encountering their clients.
Yeah, you did all this great stuff. And then if you don't document it well, you kind of lost some of your efficiency right then. And you got to go back and try and figure it out later. You're not fresh. So what are the ways I can organize things? But what are the ways I think about what happened? How does that lead me to do what I am going to do? How do I need to think about the words I use again? Hopefully by now we've set you up with a paradigm that allows you to, or a lens that allows you to look at this in a strength-based way and recognize that your documentation is going to follow people far into their future, and it needs to be thoughtfully and carefully and with good stewardship accomplished. Just a few quick examples of best practices that we do in our chapters here. And I wanted to just kind of pause here because this is so important.
I don't know what's going on. That's mine. Why are you going in there?
Oops. It's funny how sometimes people come off mute at times that seem a little like awkward moments in their life. Anyway, we hope you're okay. So, if we're going to teach skill, if we're going to say, okay, here's some theories and we want to translate these into practice, then we should do them with thought, and we should do them with social learning theory in mind. Albert Bandura, 1970s, this stuff's been around. And here's what he said: people learn by watching someone do it, by giving it a try, by getting feedback, and by practice, practice, practice. You cannot journal your way to riding a bike. You cannot read enough cooking books to be a good cook. You cannot listen to music for your whole life and know how to play it. You have to actually get on the bike. You have to actually chop up the vegetables and put them in the pan. You have to actually sit at the instrument and play it. What does that mean for our course? It means two things. We cannot expect people to act in ways that they've never learned how to act in. If we want someone to do something different, we will never be able to lecture them into it. We will never be able to say enough words to help someone regulate their emotions. The only way to learn how to regulate your emotions is to see someone do it. Have a structured approach. Give it a try. See if it works. Get feedback from the environment. Continue to practice. We learn our social skills the same way we learn our first language. We sit for 3 years and listen a lot, and then we speak. We say words and then sentences and then paragraphs, and then you can't shut us up. Right? But this is how people learn social skills too. This is how people learn coping skills as well. They learn them by default by watching the people around them. If you wanted to learn a second language, if you decided, I want to learn to speak French, you're not going to go to France and sit around listening for 3 years, hoping someone, pays attention to you. You're not as cute as a baby either, so it probably won't work. You are going to get a teacher, a book. You're going to have coaching. You're going to practice. So in both in terms of how you learn to do best practices with clients, and in terms of how clients learn to rewire their brains in ways that help them avoid trouble and have more success in their life, there is a model. There's a worksheet. We're going to role play. We're going to practice. We're going to do it in safe environments. And we have built this course around this practice model. We discuss in the course empathy, and empathy is a skill. And I believe empathy is a trainable skill. And I think we can get better at it. And we can continue, it's a muscle. We can work it out. We can improve it. And I believe that we do that in part with the things you see here, but also in part by trying our best to understand the other person and then accomplish an accurate reflective listening statement while we're looking deeply. There's a lot to motivational interviewing, and if you got trained years ago, you probably know there's a bunch of acronyms. But I always say this, and if you want to take something away from this and you haven't heard me say it before, it might be a good one to write down. There's two main things that we can always remember to do. And if we do them, we're going to be halfway there. Be curious, number one, about the other person. Be curious. Try and solve the mystery of the other person. And secondly, look for what's good. I was going to go. Okay. I'll get back to this. And then affirm it. Look for what's good. So stay curious and look for what's good. If you can do those two things when you're working with people, especially people who haven't had a lot of affirmations in their life, and offer affirmations where you see personal strengths, successes, areas where they've tried and been successful, no matter how small, we will definitely be in a good position to engage. Just before we show you a little bit on the motion regulation stuff that we did, I thought this was such a lovely quote, and I'm a big fan of Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. If you never read the book, it's pretty short and it's worth it. So give it a little read. From a psychologist who was in a Nazi concentration camp. These words come. Between stimulus and response, there is space. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and freedom. The word growth there is important, and we're going to talk about it slightly after the break. So here is our unveiling. It has draft across it, not because the words are going to change, but the way it looks might change a little bit. So here is a way for us to begin to take control over our emotions, increase that space. It seems like there's no space there, but we can work to increase that space and give ourselves room and be able to rewire our neural pathways to take more control over our lives and where we end up. Again, with affirmations, they do a couple really important things that helps us later, because we've laid this groundwork in place and the person understands that we recognize that they have power and influence in their life, in the things that matter to them. And so building their self-efficacy and confidence and communicating their value. All right, so that takes us to a moment for a brief break. This is a great time for you to get up and stretch, use the bathroom, get some more coffee. We'll see you in 5. Welcome back. Everybody had a nice moment to stretch. Let's have some word cloud fun again, Jane. What do you think?
I think it's a great idea to get our juices flowing for part 2.
Good. And then we'll do this. And then while we're doing this, you guys can be playing along. And I'm going to ask one of our other authors here to maybe read a couple highlights from the chat. So what are some, when you hear the term protective factors, what words come to mind? Menti.com. There's your QR code and there's your link for a Menti.com moment. Here we go. Safety, strengths, teachable, resources, risk. Great. Let's watch it go on. Anybody want to share with us some of the highlights from the chat while we're doing this? Margarita, Reagan?
I got it. People really liked the receiving feedback. They said it's really important in learning. A lot of people talked about how much they like social learning theory. So that was a big one too.
Good.
Yeah, and when you said there was a good comment here, like Tanya said, common sense is not common to someone who's never been taught what that is. So you had mentioned earlier about how people only know, what, when you're talking about the brain, and also like when you're talking with family members, like people only know what they've been taught, and people seem to really like that.
Yeah, it's easy to forget sometimes. We want to just tell people to act right, to do better. But if they don't know what, and often we tell people what not to do. This is really common in the system. Don't do this, don't do that, but they don't know what to do. We got to teach them what to do instead of what they did before. I like to make the little analogy that if the only thing I know how to do is punch it in the face if you call my mama a name, guess what I'm gonna do every time you call my mama a name? Well, punch in the face. So we got to teach people to have choices, to be empowered, in control of themselves, so that they still have the ability to punch someone, but they have other tools that they can use, and they can make a choice to use those other tools as well. Look at this beauty. I've got safety, support, strength, support system, attachment, understanding, trust, empathy, food. I was curious. So my curiosity was, would we get some of the same words that we got in our first word cloud? And it does look different. Skylar, do you have a comment on the differences in these two word clouds? I know I wasn't going to try not to call on you, but I'm just kind of curious what you think.
Yeah, I see a lot of focus on really, I think, kind of the day in and day out practices that people are encountering, which is how to set up resources, how to look for safety and the resilient security. And I do see some repeaters like family, and I feel like we saw love and trust and things like that before. So I'm really surprised as well, but I love what's being shared out here. And I know we had some people post in the chat as well, things like compliance, safety, resiliency, personal rights, network, things that keep the family functioning, skills, information, knowledge. So really great input today.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I was feeling the same. Any comments from you, Jane, on these word cloud differences or similarities?
I'm actually not surprised at the similarities, it makes sense. But while I have your attention, I just wanted to say that that Viktor Frankl quote really affected me. I remember when I first read it too, I was like, and I wanted to highlight that each chapter has very carefully selected quotes just like that one, that are impactful and meaningful, and gave me the opportunity to pause and think and reflect. And if you were affected by that Viktor Frankl quotation, Jen and her team have taken care to put just as meaningful and impactful quotations throughout each of the modules. So just an aside from the word cloud, while we're, thinking about words and the power of them and the meaning behind them, the quotes that you provide do just that, leave powerful impacts. So.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. If someone said something particularly well, why try to say it differently yourself? Just go ahead and quote them and cite them. And we had a little fun with that, honestly, as a team. I asked our team a couple of times towards the beginning of the process to come to meetings with a favorite quote. And I kind of left it big and broad at first, and then we sort of started honing it down, and we were able to not just identify some really great quotes that way, but also to learn about each other and how to collaborate as a development team by seeing what was important and what kinds of things different team members picked out. So we had a lot of fun with that. All right. Well, let's keep on a trucking then. This is going to be a good segue back into the protective factors. I think if you, okay. Great. We knew that we wanted to ensure not just that we were responding to the most modern views on best practices, but that we were also building this through a strength-based lens. And so, everybody talks about strength-based, but what really is that? And when we come in and we have an expectation, and rightly so, to ensure safety and measure risk, it's like sometimes we forget to look for what's good. And if we're looking for where risk is exclusively, we're doing a disservice, because how do we help people to become themselves, their best selves, to expand, to grow towards more and more successes in their life, if we're only paying attention to risk? So don't get it twisted. Or paying attention to risk and safety are vital and important. They just can't be all we do. So let's tune in. How do we tune in? What are we tuning into? We did a pretty nice comprehensive lit review across multiple helping fields. And we compared both risk factor models and protective factor models. And we discovered something that many of you already know. Protective factors aren't just the opposite of risk factors. There's more to them than that. And we developed our own new framework. So here's our protective factors flower, you'll see. And we actually structured this in order from most important or most impactful to least impactful, with the caveat, let me say, that if it made it to a petal on our flower, it's important. So all these things are important, but some of them have more impact than others. And so we'll go through each of these now, and we'll start with the ones that made it all the way to the top of the list. Number one, the most important thing, how does a person think? What are the core beliefs that drive those thoughts? This is more important than anything else because it actually affects everything. This affects everything. You can help, case manager. Thank you so much. You helped me find a job, but it's up to me to keep that job, right? And if I still think in ways that lead me to trouble, then I'm likely to do things that are not going to be helpful to me in that job. I'm likely to tell someone to, go pound salt because I don't like what they've asked me to do. Or I'm likely to show up late because I don't value what's happening there. And so how I think about the world matters the most. And this is why we have so strongly highlighted the cognitive behavioral framework, because cognitive behavioral says how I think leads to how I act, leads to my outcomes. And if I want to help someone change the way they're acting, I have to start by helping them change the way they think. And the only way to do that is to start to pay attention to our thoughts, to recognize where our thoughts are risky and leading us to trouble, and to find new thinking that helps us to head towards success and away from trouble. So, number one, most important. Second, emotion regulation. I've got this wiring in my brain, and here's the crazy thing that it's really helpful if we can remember. Particularly important for individuals who suffered a lot of trauma early on. It's like in their brain, there's like a super freeway from hippocampus to amygdala. And it's like an old overgrown dirt road to the frontal cortex. That's where we get to logic things out. We've all been in our amygdala. This is our fight, flight, or freeze. And if you have, a spouse in your life or a significant other or someone you're very close with, and you get in you're both in your amygdala, you're just having the same argument you always had and you can't think straight, you say, I just need to walk around the block and then let's come back and talk about it. Because you need to get back into your frontal cortex to have the conversation and make any sense of it, right? Just triggering each other like crazy. So we can help people who have that super freeway to their amygdala. You see this in your clients when the smallest thing happens and they react as if it's a crisis. That's when you know it's there. And so we can help people build a super freeway to their frontal cortex. And we do that with structured social learning. So really an exciting and important part of both the curriculum and the protective factors model. This one's no surprise to anyone on here. We've got healthy family systems premiering as number 3 on the list of protective factors. We've given you some examples, concrete examples of what it looks like when the family system is healthy. How do I notice that? I can kind of notice when it's unhealthy, but what clues do I have that there's some health there? There's some good things there that I can grow. I'd rather grow some good stuff than try to stomp out some bad stuff. It's easier. And so how do we recognize it, see it, affirm it, and grow it? Positive social support. I wanted to give Jane an opportunity just to speak briefly on why positive social support made our list of protective factors.
Well, all of us can relate to the fact, because we've all experienced how getting through difficult times has been made easier with having social support, you know, and also research has shown that social support has a lot of many aspects of social support has a direct impact on our wellness. And when we're thinking in terms of somebody who's misusing substances, it will greatly reduce the risk of, you know, things like loneliness, alcohol, drug use, depression. You know, having this social support in place has a lot of stress reducing effects. So it's crucial that this was highlighted in your flower, Jen. You know,
And as people start to change, it's like the people they hang out with has to start to change, right? Like if I'm going to make these changes, I got to look around and go, who's around me? What kind of influence are those? And it's not always easy to find new positive influences. So we've tried to give a little structure around helping people do that. And you'll be glad to hear how we imagined these pieces within the curriculum. Education and vocation are a part of just self-growth. How do I continue to expand? And it doesn't have to be formal education, but you know, what are the things that I'm doing that give me that sense of confidence, that I'm achieving goals and that I'm finding meaning in that. And last but not least, pro-social activities and routines are the last one on the list here. How do I structure my day? So important if you're a parent, finding ways that you can ensure that kids have that. So important for children to have that structure, to have some routine, some predictability, and to be able, it gives us an opportunity to thrive when we have more structure and be more creative, which seems a little counterintuitive. So that's our protective factors model. But we did something really interesting with it. Not only did we use it as a framework, but at the end of each of our chapters, we added an activity for the professional to go ahead and grow that factor in their own life so that they can start to recognize, I think, to not be a hypocrite, but also just to understand something fully, I kind of need to experience it myself, digest it myself, see it through the lens of how it feels in my life. And then it's a much easier step to recognizing it in others. So, you know, adult learners want to know how and why and understand it through their own personal lens. We know that from adult learning theory. And so we took this, whole model, turned it on its end a little bit and said, let you each as a professional have an experience growing these factors in your own life. Any thoughts about how we did that, Jane?
I think it was a really fitting ending to each of the chapters or modules. And again, I just the way you explained it, I felt myself, putting everything that I just read, the practical tips, the critical thinking, the knowledge that was gained. I gave myself time for reflection. So quite literally at the end of each chapter, when I saw the markers that the self-growth component was coming up, I would sit back, maybe make myself a cup of tea and just really look at it as if it was self-care. It was a lesson for me. And more times than not, I had something going on in my life that I could directly relate this to. So I think the audience members will love this part of each chapter.
Awesome. I was gonna also thank you so much for saying that, Jane. And I know you're gonna probably hop off a little early here because you have just come back from a European trip and are still jet lagged and trying to get all your things back in order. But we can't say enough how much we appreciate you joining. I was gonna also invite Reagan Hamilton to just say a few words because she was an important part of translating each of these domains into activities. All the team members contributed to the activities in here, but she pulled it all together in one core place and kept us on track. Reagan, did you want to say a couple of words about the self-growth series?
Honestly, like you and Jane have really explained it like so well. It sounds like, you know, like such an overview, but honestly, like I'm just like so grateful that we were able to not just look at the work that, you know, they do, that you all do, but also just like see how amazing you all are as people and really acknowledge that in the curriculum and just allow you to have an opportunity for some self-growth. Because we know that you can't pour from an empty cup, and you can only grow in that if we're also sowing into you as an individual. So I'm really glad that we were able to incorporate this piece into the curriculum at the end of everything, and also as a companion document. So yeah.
Yeah, it could almost be a course all by itself, right?
Yeah, honestly.
So here's the last key part in chapter 12. We actually say, you know what, we gave you all this crazy information, but don't freak out. It's okay. Here is the 1-page cheat sheet / observation tool. So what we want to achieve is that each professional that goes through this course can walk away and do a structured contact session with a family member that aligns with the police support model. And they would do these things in this order. If you see over there to the side, it's kind of small, but I can make it a little bigger. Here you see each of the PLEASE. And when you get to support, you complete one or more of the below sections. And here are the sections that you've learned about in the course. And so this just brings it all together, and it makes it a lot, hopefully, easier at the end to know that you're doing what you've been trained to do, and you're doing it in a particular way. We call that fidelity. I was thinking along the way, we probably should have put this slide a little bit up at the front, but that's okay. We're here now. So our course is it's considered blended learning. We have the 12 online asynchronous modules, which you saw earlier. And along with a self-growth series in those modules, those chapters, there are 12 courses. There are 12 chapters. Along the way, we get together 3 times as a group online, and you'll receive direct instruction training. So at the beginning, so towards the middle, and then at the end. And we have one-on-one coaching to help support your learning growth questions and so forth. So Margarita, would you talk to us a little bit, just briefly, about your role as the virtual engagement learning coach?
Yeah, of course. So what's unique about this is not only is the coaching a unique part of a lot of trainings in general, but I am a part of the development team. I'm one of the authors, so I know the content and I can be used as a support to anybody enrolled in the course in that cohort to answer questions, process any of the skills or get your feedback, and really just anything that you need in regards to this course. All the participants in the course will meet with me for at least one session, but there are 3 coaching sessions where we can get together and talk, get to know each other, talk about the course, and prepare for some of those direct instruction trainings. So the very first session will just be us talking to one another so we can really lay the foundation, get what your learning goals are, see what you want to get out of this course. Then there's another coaching session where we can talk about it. It's farther down the line where you've already gone through a lot of those chapters. So it's a great time to ask questions, give your feedback, and really process the skills together. And then we have one final session together if you choose, and that's where we'll kind of prepare you for the very last direct instruction component, where you're gonna like work with small groups and actually put this theory and these skills into practice. And so you'll get to actually practice it with one another with Jen. So that's a long way to say I'm here to support all the students and in any way that they need, really.
Exactly. And you're going to have office hours too. So you have three structured approach or 3 structured opportunities. But if you need something before, in between, you have office hours you're going to offer people, and that should get everybody what they need along the way. Okay. So here's how you register. If you want a screenshot or pull out your phone and see if our code works, that's one way. You can also apply at the Florida Institute for Child Welfare, ficw.fsu.edu/SOS. We'd love to do we're about to transition into some questions time here. And so we definitely appreciate everybody's attendance today, and we would love for you to chat box us one thing that you liked that you learned today. One thing that you liked that you learned today.